I'm going to introduce the final speaker for the weekend, Will Travers, who is the president of the Born Free Foundation and came all the way from England to join us this weekend. He's going to share a little bit about his experiences in wildlife conservation, and if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Travers.
Thank you. So firstly, I just want to say firstly, it's been a huge privilege to be here. I have 10 minutes, but I'm going to make it a tiny bit longer. I came a long way. It's been a real privilege to be here the last couple of days. I mean, just heard such amazing things. Again, I'm going to say thanks to Josh and Sam and Maya and Henrik and Team Blueprint and the sponsors and everybody and you all. You know, congratulations to you all, and I'm looking forward to next year. So, what am I going to say? So I have been doing this for 34 years. Yeah, you can say it's impossible. And so I've got to do 34 years in about 600 seconds, and I have 138 images. So it's just going to be quick. A bit of family history, a bit about Born Free, and then some of the challenges that we faced and continue to face, and then maybe these are the sort of things that some of the things we've been talking about may help us resolve. I don't know. So here we go. Born Free. Yeah, it's me with the Rupert Bear trousers. It's embarrassing. The film Born Free, my mum, dad, the real George and Joy Adamson, 1964 in Africa. We lived there as a family. So here's a challenge. How do you make a film about lions and people without anyone getting killed? And you put everyone in cages except for the actors and the lions. And you get to know them, and you get to love them, and you get to trust them, and they get to trust you. And of course, in 9 times out of 10 it works fine, and then sometimes it doesn't. Here's a lion about to attack my mum and break her leg. Carried on filming, of course. Yeah, one day all this will be mine. So when filming stopped, my dad started making documentary films. The first film he made was about some of the lions used in the film Born Free. We became very, very good friends with George, and there's George and my dad sitting on an elephant skull, as you do. And George I knew reasonably well, and he was a remarkable man, and I was with my dad in a little car beside George when this photograph was taken. There's 6 adult lions here, there's one sneaking in the back there, and they tried to kill George on at least one occasion, and his brother on one occasion, and his assistant Tony on one occasion, so it wasn't an easy ride. But this kind of relationship with lions was pretty special, and this particular lion actually came from Harrods Pet Department in London, and if you have seen the clip on YouTube called The Reunion, which is 2 Australians getting hugged by a lion. It's been seen about 120 million times on YouTube with Whitney Houston singing in the background. That was the lion. So the film was made, and it was a world premiere when world premieres meant something. Now there's a world premiere every week, who cares? And then my folks started making films with animals, particularly, and this is an elephant that they made a film with. Her name is Poli Poli, which means slowly, slowly in Swahili, and she went as a gift to London Zoo. There is the gorgeous London Zoo elephant house, modelled on an East German hat factory, designed by one of our top architects, but obviously not an architect who knows anything about elephants. She became mentally disturbed. This is her aged 13. And she looks about 30 or 40. And Mum and Dad went to see her after 10 years. Not having seen her for 10 years, they called her name, that whole thing an elephant never forgets. And my dad called her name, she came racing down, reached out her trunk. And it's that sort of moment. And unfortunately, we tried to pressure the zoo to give us the elephant and take her back to Africa. Didn't happen, she collapsed. A week later, she was destroyed. That was the last African elephant in the London Zoo. And we set up an organization at the time called Zoo Check, which has morphed into the Born Free Foundation. So now I'm just going to race through a whole bunch of things. We focus on zoos, and let me be plain, We are an anti-zoo organization because there are too many downsides and not enough upsides, and we think of individual animals as a priority. So these are some images these are taken last year. So these are animals in zoos, and more in zoos, and Dolphinaire is a zoo, by the way, or it's a circus, depending on your point of view. And then there's this, and then there's that, and then there's this. You see how quick we can do this. But one of the things I'm most proud about in terms of our zoo work is that we were the organization that persuaded the European Union, you know, that big thing over there that the administration here is not very keen on, to introduce a thing called the Zoo Directive, which requires all 3,500 zoos in Europe to be licensed. They don't have to do anything particularly tough to be licensed, but they have to be licensed, which gives us a tool to go after them if they don't have a license. So we work in a number of places as well. The corollary of not liking zoos is you say, well, what do you want? And our slogan is keep wildlife in the wild. So we work to try and keep wildlife in the wild, but sometimes we can't get animals back to the wild. So this is chamois in southern Africa, in the Eastern Cape. And here's a lion in a cage that needs rescue, and here's that lion in chamois being released into an enclosure. It's a Care for Life sanctuary situation. We use it as an educational tool. We have about 4,000 kids a year go through here. Similarly in Malawi, here's a lioness that's, gosh, I can't even remember where she came from. And she's very aggressive and unhappy, and now she's fine. And we do a lot of work with vets. This is Johan Joubert, one of the best vets, wildlife vets in South Africa, who's one of our consultants, works at chamois. And this is the kind of life that we hope to be able to offer to as many big cats as we possibly can. And here's our lovely team in South Africa with my mum and a lovely Land Rover. Okay, so now I'm going to move to Ethiopia. So I went to Ethiopia about 10 years ago, and I went to the Lion Zoo in Addis Ababa, which is a thing about the size of this room. It's divided like an orange segment. So you have little orange segments in each one. There are 3 or 4 lions. It's an absolute abomination. So I said to the Italian embassy, would they help us? And they did, and they introduced us to the president. And we established a thing called Ensesakote, which means animal footprint in Amharic. And here is the president of Ethiopia laying the foundation stone, and I'm wearing a beige suit. Yeah. Here's our team in Ethiopia. I don't know what Yanene is doing there with his hands. Anyway, we have taken an old gun emplacement, an old range used by the military, and I do not want to know what it was used by the military. But we've turned it into the treehouse, which is our visitor and education center. And we have 7,000 kids a year going through this. And we tell stories. We tell stories about Ethiopia's wildlife. It's amazing wildlife, a lot of endemic species. But we also focus on individuals. So here's a lion, his name's Dolo. He was on a 1 meter long, 3 foot long chain for 4 years. His mane had been rubbed off, he'd become mute. He is partially sighted because he's had such bad nutrition. We rescued him, and here he is now. Yeah, there's a few artifacts. I don't have any flamethrower. But I do have that. And then we also help, through the establishment of that center, we help with wildlife law enforcement, because Ethiopia is a funnel for live trade out to the Middle East, and one of the key species that's used in live trade, sold in live trade, is the cheetah. And as you may know, there are only 7,000 wild cheetah left in the world, so any trade is a huge pressure, but we've managed to rescue a bunch, and then they get lost with us. But we rescue and help a whole bunch of species. So we have tortoises, we have dozens of tortoises, we have baboons, we've been releasing gelada baboons back into the wild. There's servals, there's civet cats, there's hyenas, there's duikers, and as I say, education, wildlife law enforcement, individual animal care, good stories to tell. It's the only facility of its kind in the country. Born Free USA, right here. It's not without, you're not without problems to do with animals, and we have the biggest primate sanctuary in the US, down in Texas. Here it is, looking particularly lovely in spring. It gets a bit dry in the summer, and it gets a bit cold in the winter, but here are 550 primates that we have there, and they've come from labs, and they've come from confiscations, and they've been donated by owners who realize that this is not the surrogate child that they thought they had, and when it shreds them or shreds their dog, they hand it over. And we have to re-socialize many of these animals because they don't know how to behave as little primates anymore. So re-socialization is important. We have various species there. Dolphins, we've been involved with dolphins, obviously a very current issue here in the States with blackfish. So, but this is not in the States, this is in Turkey. Russian guy built a dolphinarium, actually it was just a swimming pool, and then he didn't pay the bill, so he fled, and the town said to us, you can have the dolphins if you pay the bills. And there was $130,000 worth of outstanding bills, and we paid them, and they said, great, now take the dolphins, so we did, and we put them initially into some crappy little enclosure, I'm afraid to say, because we didn't have anything else. But then we bought a salmon pen, and we put them in a salmon pen, and we spent a lot of time retraining them so that there was speed training for muscle tone and ability to catch live fish. And then we opened the pen, took down one of the sidewalls. My brother's a diver, so he did this for us, and then out they went. And we satellite tagged them so we could follow them, and that was a successful release. And in terms of the UK, we have no captive dolphins in the UK and haven't had since 1992. So I think that there is a growing movement away from the exploitation of these marine mammals in captivity. Circuses, well, you're pretty familiar with what goes on with circuses, so I won't belabor this, but that's not acceptable. That is not acceptable. In my view, does nothing for education, does nothing for conservation, does a lot of bad things for animal welfare. So does that. We are on the verge, we're on the cusp. I had a meeting with our minister responsible for the environment only a week or so ago, and he said we're going to change the legislation and it will be illegal to keep wild animals in circuses in the UK this year. We've been waiting 10 years. We do straight conservation stuff, so these are Ethiopian wolves, the only wolf in Africa. There's 500 in the world. There are none in captivity. They're only found in Ethiopia. They're only found above 10,000 feet above sea level. And they're not persecuted intentionally by people, but people's dogs have rabies, and the rabies goes to the wolves. And the last time we had an outbreak, we lost 20% of the world's population in 3 months. So we do wolf vaccination programs, and we're moving away from this injecting the wolves, knocking them down, injecting them. We're using a live bait, a live vaccine inside a bait, which we can put outside the denning areas. And who knows, I don't think there'll ever be more than 1,000 wolves in the world of this species. But if you ever go into Ethiopia, it's an absolute must. So quickly racing on, ELSA'S legacy. So we do some lion work. There's ELSA on top of a Land Rover. And here's a lion with a dart sticking out of it. And here's us doing research. We did a lion census in central Kenya recently. We have 50-odd lions in the area that we are working in, and our objective is to expand our work there to try and protect more lions. Lions, as you probably know. So how many African elephants are there? Anybody?
3,000.
There's 415,000 African elephants. How many lions are there? 20,000. So there's 20,000 lions. There's fewer lions than there are rhino. And yet lions are off the radar. So we need to do something about that. Trophy hunting, we have had very interesting conversations here about trophy hunting. Some people think it's a good idea. I think it's not particularly a good idea. And I think that it's a moral argument. I really do. I don't think killing animals for fun is an acceptable practice, regardless of the benefits that it brings. I hate seeing things like that. I hate seeing things like that even more. And I hate seeing things like that, particularly on the right-hand side. And we run campaigns on this. If you haven't seen the film Trophy, then you should. You should. I mean, it's a strong program. I disagree with it profoundly. I think it's misleading in many respects. Many of the facts presented in it are not actually true and are unchallenged. And I have argued that with the producers and directors of the film. Not to great avail, but we managed to get on CNN. That's my chief executive in the States, there on the right with the ribbon. And there is one of the hunters in the film on the left-hand side. This is the guy, if you watch the film, who shoots an elephant, doesn't kill it, goes up, watches it suffering and breathing, shoots it again, doesn't kill it. then goes off and have a cigarette while it chokes itself to death. We do relocation and release, so how do you move a giraffe? Well, here you go. So how you move a giraffe, you have to capture it, and then you have to put a hood on it, and then you have to put it in a truck, and then if you want to take it a long distance, you have to put it in a bigger truck, and then you take it to a boma where you prepare it for release, and then ultimately you release it back into the wild. So how do you move elephants? Well, this is a little old school because this has moved on a bit, but here's a truck that we bought for elephant translocation in Kenya. It's only a one elephant at a time job, which is not what happens nowadays. They tend to move 3 or 4 at a time. And here's an elephant. It's a big elephant. And you have to flip it over, and then you have to roll it up into the truck. And then when you release it, he's mad as hell. He is mad as hell. And I was on top of the crate that we released him from, so I managed to get that shot. I just want to show you this very briefly. Here's some tigers in a cage. We've rescued a bunch of tigers in the past, but one of the problems in India is what's called conflict tigers. And the Indian authorities capture these animals and then to reduce conflict, to win the trust of local communities. But in that process, things can go wrong, and sometimes tigers are captured alive, but they've been in a snare. So here's a really mad, angry tiger that's been caught, and here he is being translocated, and here he is at our sanctuary missing a leg. And here he is in a pool having a rest in our place in southern India, in Banagata. And then in the wild, we do monitoring of different species. So here we are monitoring lions, and here are some lions that we've monitored. It's profound stuff. And then we do anti-poaching support, and then we release primates back into the wild. We have an incredibly successful primate release program in Zambia. It's over 90% success in returning little primates to the wild. And here's Cosmos, who met Prince William and got an award for his amazing work. And here he is in the field doing stuff, and there's me talking to some guys and wearing shorts, good grief. And then we work with communities, and I am coming to the end, and I know I'm overrunning, but here's my mum doing some dancing, and here's a school and a classroom that we're helping, and I look out here at this fantastic room, so it's fantastic for me anyway, and I think of how difficult it is for kids in many parts of Africa to get a chance, just to get a chance, to get into secondary school when there is no secondary school. So we're working with those kids, and we're planting little forest gardens, and we're working on basic computer skills so that people have a chance of getting into the kind of things that we sort of take for granted. And here we are down at one of our other schools, and then I've got 2 sections to go. We do a lot of advocacy work, particularly to do with wildlife trade. So I do a bit of that, and a bit of that, and a bit of that. A bit of this, and my mum comes along and helps, and then we go and meet people like him. It's Charles, and trying to persuade him it's a good idea to do the right thing. Here's my chief executive again. I'm just putting him in for good measure. And then we do stuff. We are very active. So, this is, wearing shorts again. I'm climbing Kilimanjaro, and I take some of my trustees with me, my directors of my not-profit, and we go up there, which is great, and we get to the top, and we do that, and I've done that twice, and I'm not doing it again, don't ask. And then we do things like racing mountain bikes down Mount Kenya, and coming last, but finishing and raising funds, and I've done that 3 times, and I'm not doing that again. And so here we go. We think of Born Free as a family, and it does have family roots, but we have this kind of family, we have this kind of feeling amongst the people that support us and work with us, and we put on events where we bring wildlife to people, obviously not real, because we don't do that kind of thing, but here's a puppet elephant that's come in to join us for an event that we just did last November. And there's my dear mum talking about it to our 350 guests. And here's Joanna Lumley, if you know who she is, from Absolutely Fabulous and other things, joining us for the evening. So that's the family. This is, my family. 2 of us in Kenya. And I'd like to invite you very much to be part of our family. So this is the innovation into conservation. That's what you do, and I'm thrilled to be even remotely associated with it, and you can always scribble down these details if you want to. And now, I need you, John. Because I have a book to present a blueprint, which I brought all the way from the UK. And it's a book called Remembering Rhinos. It's part of the Remembering series, which is the world's greatest wildlife photographers all donating one photograph to go into this book. It's absolutely fantastic. And just a thank you for having me here.